What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Philip Enriquez, welcoming you back to the Say What You Like Sports Podcast. It's been quite a while since I've uploaded anything up to the channel, but I came across something really interesting I just felt I had to talk about. Came across a new podcast by Brad Sham. And for those of you guys out there who do not know who Brad Sham is, he is the Cowboys' local play-by-play man. He was formerly a color commentator, but he's been the play-by-play man in Dallas, for the local broadcast for years now. But he's got a new podcast out. He's calling it Then and Now. And the first guest on the podcast was none other than the most controversial player perhaps in Cowboys history, former quarterback Tony Romo. And man, did Tony Romo have a lot of interesting things to say on that podcast. I just felt like I had to come on here, make an episode, and talk about it with you guys, get a conversation started. So if you've heard the podcast, leave your comments on what you feel Tony Romo meant with some of the comments, because I think he gave us quite a bit of insight on what it is that makes the Cowboys offense Romo friendly, what it should be to make a Cowboys offense Dak friendly. He talked about the way defenses play Dez Bryant currently and how they played Dez Bryant when he was the starting QB of the Cowboys. And he even possibly took a small shot at the coaching staff and their preparation. So I can't wait to play a couple of clips and go over some of what Tony Romo said. Let's go ahead and put up clip 1 right now.
There was all the talk about we're going to make this offense Romo-friendly. That was always interesting to me because Terrence Williams once said to me that when you're playing with Tony, when the play ends, that's when the play starts.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things you did best. I think you'd agree with that.
Yep.
So in that clip, we hear Brad Sham bring up the term Romo-friendly, making the Dallas Cowboys offense Romo-friendly. Now, that's a term I haven't heard in a long time. Takes me way back to that 2009 offseason for the Cowboys, where Jerry Jones started throwing out the phrase, we need to make this offense more, quote-unquote, Romo-friendly. Now, in 2009, that was the season that they let go of T.O., a veteran but diva wide receiver who demanded the ball, along with strengthening the offensive line throughout the years. But talking about making an offense Romo-friendly, quarterback-friendly for the Dallas Cowboys, can we learn from the history here? And can we apply it to this new term being thrown out around the Star down in Texas, making it Dak-friendly? Could that mean that we're cutting another veteran diva wide receiver who demands the ball, has admitted that, sometimes his head isn't in the right place on the sidelines or even in the game? Could that be one less headache and be a more friendlier offense for Dak Prescott? I'm not sure, but it is a topic, especially recently, that has been heavily debated. Should a Dak-friendly offense include a wide receiver like Dez Bryant? In my personal opinion, this goes for any team. I think that you pretty much take your young quarterback, over a veteran wide receiver. Basically, your quarterback should be grooming a young wide receiver rather than your veteran diva wide receiver trying to get the quarterback to adapt to him. That's just my personal take on it. But let's go a little deeper into the Tony Romo interview with Brad Sham. Let's put up clip 2.
Dak Prescott has a different skill set of strengths and weaknesses. So how do you make an offense Dak-friendly?
Well, I think you take his skill set. I mean, for me, the coaches would get almost annoyed at times because I would want to always have answers for everything. So I was like, well, we don't have enough, cover 4 man beaters. We only have to run these 2 plays. Well, they're going to get a beat up. But we'd only play 2 teams that year who had that or something. And so we wouldn't. And so for me, that was always a struggle a little bit, was that when they talked about Romo friendly, in some ways I feel like I just wanted to have the ability to get to anything within a game. And I really feel like the NFL, it's an ability to adjust within the game, within the season, from year to year, and just because teams are going to eventually take away a little bit of what you do well. Now, sometimes you're lucky enough to have this dominant defensive line, and you can run simple coverages over and over. Sometimes you're lucky enough to have this dominant offensive line, which we've been. We've had that, and you can keep things fairly simple. But at some point, you're going to have to also self-scout yourself, adjust, continually evolve. And if you're the same offense you were 5 years ago, you're in trouble in the NFL. I don't care, who you are or how much talent you have.
Shots fired by Tony Romo. He says, I don't care who you are or how much talent you have stacked on an offensive line or a defensive line. Adjustments have to be made. Teams will study you, get used to you, take away some of your strengths, take away what you like to do on a certain side of the ball, and you got to change things up a bit. So in my opinion, that is a little bit of a shot to the Dallas Cowboys coaching staff. He also went on to talk about how, he would often question the coaching staff and, maybe they didn't really like that too much. And I think that's also a bit of a clue in onto the whole Scott Linehan and Dak Prescott dynamic, because from the way I understand it, Scott Linehan really stepped up to the table for the Cowboys to draft Dak Prescott in the first place. I think Scott Linehan was looking for a young QB that he could groom. The more and more that I listened to this interview, the more and more I took it as this is all a power struggle within the Dallas Cowboys organization. Who gets to groom who? Tony Romo spoke about it a little bit more in the podcast, saying that when he was a young player, T.O. was able to control the mood in the locker room more than he was. But that by the time Dez Bryant came around, Romo was able to control the narrative and the mood going on in the locker room. So it's all about who's grooming who. T.O. was trying to groom Tony Romo, and the Cowboys weren't having that. They wanted to make the offense Romo friendly. But by the time Dez came to the Cowboys, Romo was able to groom Dez, and they were able to establish that connection. But now, as Michael Irvin had previously stated, now Dez is the veteran, and he's trying to groom Dak Prescott to be the type of quarterback that's going to get him the ball. And thus, I think that's why you're seeing some of the frustration, because as we can all tell, that connection just ain't there. And I think that is why Scott Linehan now has pretty much tried to replace Dez Bryant as the ex-wide receiver in the Cowboys offense, because I think he's trying to protect who he's trying to groom in the young quarterback like Dak Prescott. Tony Romo did go on to talk a little bit more about making the offense Dak friendly. Let's hear what he had to say.
With Dak, the skill set, it just needs to be things that he's can do quickly. For me, my strength is reading coverage and getting through progressions very fast and getting to people and, recognizing leverage and situations, and then having seen it so many times. I mean, when you're in,
but you weren't 13, as good as you were going to be the first year you played.
No, that's what I'm saying. By the 13th and 14th year, I mean, you know all the answers to the test.
I think what we can take away from the previous Tony Romo clip is that we all have to be just a bit more patient with Dak. So for all you Dak fans and all you Dak apologists even, we know Dak had a down year. Everybody could see it as opposed to his rookie season. But as Tony Romo says, he took the bumps early on in his career, and he felt like he was playing some of the best ball in the latter stages of his career. So chill out, take a chill pill. Dak is still developing. I personally, as a Cowboys fan, have a lot of confidence in Dak going forward because I like what the kid is made of. He has the mental toughness, he has the drive, and I think he's just got a good head on his shoulders, and he's got the physical tools to get the job done. It's just something that doesn't come automatically. This is something that's going to take him a couple of years, and, he's going to get better. But the question is, who's going to be the wide receiver that gets on the same page as Dak Prescott? So far, it hasn't been Dez Bryant. I want to play another clip and wrap this thing up next.
With a younger quarterback, they don't have the ability to do that stuff before the snap. And, when I was there with Dez, be like, there are times we get go games where he get 3 or 4 times one-on-one. Well, he get the ball on all those plays. Now defenses are defending them a little different. They're allowing them to, take their shots. They hadn't, I guess, been as consistent with it, as you would in that offense. The offense just needs to tailor toward what Dak does well. And I think they're trying to do that now, and I think they're going to start to do that more, next season. And what that is, I don't know. I also would argue, though, there's a system in place. It's hard to completely overhaul. So it'll be fascinating to see how that turns out.
More interesting commentary from former quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, Tony Romo. And I think what you can take from that is whether you want to blame Dak or you want to blame Dez or you're an anti-Scott Linehan guy, the bottom line is this. Dak is most likely to be the one person in Dallas the longest. I think he's probably the quarterback of the next 12 years or so if things go to plan. Of course, not everything always goes to plan, but you got to admit that is the way things are looking right now. And when you hear some of this stuff, it just reinforces for me that Dez Bryant is the odd man out here. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, Linehan was the one who stepped up for the Cowboys to draft Dak. Linehan is the one that wants to groom Dak. I don't think he wants to give control to Dez. He doesn't want to feed Dez within his offense. And I don't think it plays to the way Scott Linehan wants to play football, whether or not you agree with it or not. But I think what we all have to admit is that's not the type of quarterback that Dak Prescott is. He's not the gunslinger that Tony Romo was. He was willing to take chances with Dez Bryant and take a gamble on Dez's ability to high point the ball, his ability to win based on just pure athletic ability. I think Dak Prescott wants to see the open man. He wants to go through his reads, go through his progressions, and hit the open man. So, all in all, I really believe that, and I'm no Scott Linehan fan, but I believe that Scott Linehan is trying to protect Dak Prescott, tailor this offense to Dak, not to Dez Bryant. And I got to agree with that because I don't think that you should tailor your offense to make your number one wide receiver happy. That's the reason they jettisoned T.O. That's the reason they said this offense is going to be Romo friendly, not T.O. friendly. And I think we're seeing more of the same now with this term Dak friendly being brought up currently around Cowboy circles. The quarterback always gets the preference over any veteran wide receiver in any organization. And I think that's why you're seeing the Cowboys take visits from Hearns. I think that's why they had an interest in Sammy Watkins, because they're trying to replace Dez. Look, I love Dez just as much as anybody. He's done a lot for the Dallas Cowboys. So I know why a lot of you guys out there are saying it's unfair to blame Dez and you can't put it all on Dez. And you're absolutely right. You can't. I think Dez is and has been a rare talent. But you also can't ignore the facts that he just hasn't been productive in the last 3 years, and he has a super high cap number. On top of that, I personally don't think he's always, emotionally stable out there. I think he gets frustrated, and I think defenses and defenders have seen that, you can get Dez off his game if you can get into his head a little bit, and I worry about that. And I don't want that to affect the way Dak Prescott plays football. Basically, what I guess the conclusion that I'm starting to come to is things are not looking good for Dez Bryant's future in Dallas. Whether he plays with the team this year or not, I think he definitely doesn't have a future unless he steps up big time. And Dak and Dez can establish that connection, which I think in the end, as much as we love to debate and as ugly as some of these debates get, especially on these YouTube comments, I think we all are pulling for Dak and Dez to get on the same page because more than likely that's going to equal some Cowboys playoff success this season. I think that's what we're all starved out. So I hope they do. But at this point, when you sort of read in between the lines, it's like Linehan ain't with it. I'm not so sure that Dak is with it. But I think Dez, he wants his numbers and he's got to support, being paid that amount of money when Personally, I think they're trying to tailor this offense to not having a dominant number one wide receiver. And I think they're thinking that based on just the fact that, I don't see Odell Beckham winning any championships. I don't see him winning Super Bowls. You don't see Julio Jones winning Super Bowls. You don't even see AB winning Super Bowls. Quarterbacks, good defenses, they win Super Bowls. That's why they went ahead and they franchised Tank Lawrence, tendered David Irving. I'm sure in the draft it's going to be heavy on defense because they just want to make sure they have that QB, that running game, that offensive line, complement that with the defensive line, win these battles at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball and, try to get some playoff success. But unfortunately, when you look at it, they are not trying to cater to the number one wide receiver on the team. That's just the way I take it. Things aren't looking good for Dez. Again, it's not to say that Dez isn't talented. It's not to say that Cowboys Nation doesn't owe Dez a big debt of gratitude for everything he's done here. And look, it almost sounds like I'm talking like it's all over. I mean, chances are he's going to be on this team, and I hope he is on the Dallas Cowboys team in the future. But I think he's got to slow his roll, own his craft. It's just time to put up and shut up. I think he does a lot more talking than he does walking. And hopefully Dez can turn that around next season. And hopefully the Dallas Cowboys turn it around big time and get back into the playoffs and hopefully back into a Super Bowl.